Welcome to This Week in Work Hard Pittsburgh. Today we are mask free because Joe Biden said it's okay to be mask free if you are vaccinated.
And so did Joe Rogan.
Oh, so two Joes make a right.
Yeah, basically.
So just one thing to remind everybody of, we're trying to shoot for I believe June 11th outside member meetup at Shiloh Gastro. So hopefully that all comes together, but keep an eye out on social and in the newsletter for more information on that. I don't really have any other, I think, impending announcements.
Not an announcement, but just take the time to say congratulations to all the Academy Pittsburgh graduates.
Yeah, Academy Pittsburgh graduates, I believe, today.
Yep.
I think they're even having a little get-together, which I'm sure they'll be masked up for. So that's nice to see. Another 23 human beings going out there, getting jobs, and repping our ecosystem. So what we thought we'd talk about today is sort of the strategic planning process that executive committee and some of the other leaders here in the ecosystem have been going through for the last 2 weeks. This strategic planning is largely driven by the realities of cash flow as we approach the end of the last RK Mellon grant cycle and look forward to more philanthropic support here. What we hope and believe is going to be in a December board meeting at the end of the year, but we won't see that cash till probably February because of the way it takes checks to move around.
So with consideration to that, as far as thinking about strategic planning, we had to take the time to really assess the entire field, see what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and really explain, why it does or does not make sense from a fiscal standpoint, but also from an efficiency standpoint. Understanding that the organization, like all businesses, are going to have to go through various levels of evolution. This is, not unlike different periods of change within the Work Hard organization that have happened before. This started, if I'm not mistaken, as a startup that really had nothing to do with all the things that it bloomed into. And that all comes from strategic planning. That all comes from executive decision making.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we did. So we literally all got in a room in a neutral location outside of Work Hard Pittsburgh, and we roadmapped or listed, I guess, everything that this ecosystem does. And it ended up being a list of about 40 things. And then we took each of those 40 things, or at least we've started to take each of those 40 things, and we've kind of separated them into programmatic tasks that we do that relate directly to what funders want to see, things that make us revenue, things that generate income for the ecosystem, and then things that we do because they feel good or they do community good, and then some things that we do because we've just always done them and they don't do anything, right? Just kind of sort of wasteful things. And the consensus is that in 2022, we're going to have to stop doing some things. And that's driven not just by cash flow, but also sort of
just the operational efficiency that we talked about before. But it's also important to note that, part of the conversation was in consideration of what funders are funding and, the reason why they're funding them, right? The reason why is because they already have an understanding of what's needed at a higher level. So just being able to really consider if the things that make us feel good are really impacting the greater good in the way that we want it to.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of drive home your point about just efficiency, when we looked at that big list and we think about all the energy, time, and background sort of cognitive processing that some of these activities eat up, you can make a really solid, convincing argument that it's not just about cash flow. It's just about using human brain power poorly in some cases, especially sort of because no matter what programmatically is happening and who individually is kind of running that programmatic stuff, the human cost trickles up and down to maintain programming.
One of the important pieces of being the mission-driven for-profit entity that we've become is making sure that there's a place to house people that have a different understanding of efficiency, right? So in a lot of kind of your normal 9 to 5 corporate structures, you're going to have people that are okay with kind of there's going to be some built-in like time wasting that happens there, right? And just burning of human capital just because they want to keep you there at the 9 to 5. We have an ecosystem of entrepreneurs and freelancers that have their own schedules, right? So it's really important to think and take into consideration all of their needs and like the efficiency of their own schedules and making sure that it works with everybody. That's why it's such an important piece to think about, okay, how are we using time? How are we using people's resources, right? Like their own time is very, it's the most important resource that they have. So making sure that we're not just asking them to come in and burn a lot of time that can be used to build up their business and things like that on something that, sounds good in principle, but doesn't actually affect the change or create the impact that we're looking for.
Or satisfies something that a funder has enumerated very specifically that we're supposed to be doing, right?
That as well.
Yeah. And so the other bit of sort of that strategic planning was like a critical look at like where we're spending money. Mm-hmm. Like on average, we spend about $71,000 a month in expenses. So, and that, is assumed to get larger in 2022 with this influx of new philanthropic support that we hope is going to come our way. Obviously, the bulk of that 71K, probably 70% or so, is salaries. Mm-hmm. It's staff costs directly related to the full-time employees, W-2 employees of this ecosystem. But there was some other stuff too, like debt service is a big chunk, and our subscriptions and like our operational costs for servers and Adobe Cloud and just the countless pay for service software products that we use is also pretty substantial. And all these things are going to continue to grow. And as much as we'd like to think that, as much as like some of the first impulses when it comes to saving money is to cut those costs, like our human resources are the only thing that differentiate us from other organizations here in town. The reality is that we've been able to gather like-minded, sophisticated technical and tech-adjacent talent and give them a unified purpose and deliver programming that, frankly, has generated $18 million or so of wages for people that aren't inside of our organization. And specifically, I'm talking about Academy Pittsburgh grads, but also on the 1099 side, last year we paid out something like $900,000 of 1099 contracts to people in our ecosystem. And of that $900,000, about half of it went to underrepresented groups. So without sort of these sophisticated salaries and salaried employees, I don't know that we can do sort of the mission work that I think motivates most of us to stick around and keep kind of plugging away this. I'm rolling over my headphones, so it's like yanking my head down.
Another part of that is that we want to find, the ultimate goal is to make sure that the organization not only becomes sustainable but becomes scalable, right? That's one of the reasons why anybody would start a business. What that means for us is that figuring out a way, to really hone in on the mechanism that would allow for, the creation of products and the creation of businesses that sustain us, really, that continue to drive this organization forward. I think the last podcast we talked briefly about some of the products, some of the hits and some of the misses that happen, going back and, having as part of the strategic planning conversation, what is it that caused this product not to work or us to not be able to launch this product, and really thinking critically about, how things are structured and if that can be an impediment on what is essentially the ultimate goal, which is building up and sustaining the organization.
And that's a great point. Like, I would make the argument all day that the best thing we can do for anybody who's a member of this ecosystem or participant is wealth building, is to increase their economic stability and what they're able to do for their families and their communities. And all the other things that we do, I don't want to diminish their value, but the goal of this has always been, at least for me, to make it so that more people could find that economic stability and live happy, more rich lives, and be honestly more influential in the culture and in the politics of their region. A wealthy person, unfortunately, generally gets to influence what's happening in their community more than someone who's living in poverty, just because they have more free time, if nothing else, right? As we look forward to 2022, like, there's going to be some tough conversations that have to happen around sort of how we're going to restructure and what priorities we're going to focus on. Some of those conversations, honestly, aren't even choices. They are just imposed on us by financial reality. They are imposed on us by what our funders want to see us to do. So this podcast, in part, is just kind of a little bit of a preview of what's to come. And just know that, like, everybody here is still trying to solve the problem and work the mission. But yeah, there's lots to do, and there's lots of change coming. And honestly, that's a good thing. Change is what motivates new, and has always in this ecosystem, what motivates new and cool outcomes. Anything else?
This is kind of like when you sit down, like when a married couple sits down their kid and they're like, hey, listen, mom and dad, we both love you. It's not you. So with that joke, everybody hold on to your butts. Let's get on and ride.
Yeah, cool stuff's happening. It's going to be fun. All right. Thanks, guys. We will see you next week.